Welcome to yet another lecture in our series of lectures on Rest 100, Religion and Ethics in Society. In our previous discussion, we focused on sexual morality, in which case we looked at the various responses to the question of what is the appropriate sexual behavior. And today we are going to focus on abortion. Indeed, the perennial question that begs our response is this: should abortion be allowed, or should it be legalized? Now, there are a number of reasons why very many women would consider abortion. One of these compelling reasons traditionally has been if it's considered that the life of the mother is in danger in case the pregnancy is allowed to come to term. The other point that is should considered is when it's considered that or discovered that the child in question is severely impaired. That reason that compels some women to procure pregnancy is in cases where the child in question or the pregnancy in question is a result of rape or incest. And the other point that is often considered is institutions where the mother is unmarried. Thus, the fear of the stigma of illegitimacy, because in many communities, a child born out of wedlock is considered unwanted, and therefore, the question of legitimacy arises. The other point that is often considered is the question of finances, especially when the couples think that an extra person or a child is an additional financial burden to an already straining family. The other point and possible consideration, and especially among school-going girls, is when it's considered that the pregnancy may jeopardize the career of the girl child. Because now we know very many cases where, yes, small girls are conceiving. Indeed, the conception may undermine or may interfere with the career or development of the particular girl. Now, some couples also abort when they think that the unborn child or the born child may interfere with their freedom and happiness when born. Equally, there are many reasons indeed, and these reasons we know them, but still abortion remains a controversial issue. And for your information, it's important to note that the Kenya Constitution does not allow abortion. It's illegal in the laws of Kenya. Now, to the question of whether or not abortion should be allowed, there are various religious and moral responses. And among those who have responded to that question include conservatives, moderate conservatives, liberalists, moderate liberalists, feminists, and people of faith or the religious groups. Now, according to conservatives, abortion should not be allowed for any reasons. Abortion should not be allowed for any reasons. That is the conservative position, because an unborn child at any stage is a human being, and its rights must be respected by all. However, the moderate conservatives challenge this argument and argue that that there are certain circumstances that should be considered and make abortion morally acceptable, especially, for example, if the mother's health is in danger. Therefore, the moderates argue that under such circumstances and other serious reasons, if there are, abortion should be allowed. The liberals, on the other hand, support abortion. They support abortion and argue that a fetus, and for that matter, an unborn child, is not a human being and therefore has no moral status. In fact, they argue that flushing that baby out is equivalent to flushing out an unwanted tissue, like an appendix, for example. However, when under pressure by conservatives, the moderate, the liberalists divide the pregnancy into two stages. There is the fetal stage. The fetal stage, in which case they argue that a fetus is a human being. It's a grown child and has shown conspicuous human features, and aborting it is considered immoral. However, they argue that while it's wrong to abort a fetus, there is nothing wrong aborting a zygote, because a zygote is simply a mass of blood. Therefore, there's nothing wrong aborting it. Okay? The moderate liberals, on the other hand, argue that while abortion does not necessarily violate the human rights of a fetus, the practice itself is ethically problematic because of its negative consequences on the child, especially when it occurs during later stages of pregnancy, when the fetus has developed conspicuous human features. Indeed, at this point, then, abortion is equivalent to murder, and so the moderate liberals oppose abortion because really it's equivalent to murder. The feminists, on the other hand, argue that women have a right to choose what to do with their bodies. Since they are the ones who conceive, they should be left free to choose whether or not to abort. It's nobody else's business. So women will want to abort, on demand. If they want to do it, they should be allowed, because it is their right. It is their human right to abort when they want to. Okay, that's the position of feminists. On the other hand, there are also religious arguments. Christianity Christianity forbids direct killing of innocent human beings. Abortion, therefore, is forbidden morally by Christians, even if the life of the mother is in danger. Right? They argue that life is sacred, and the killing of babies born or unborn is unacceptable. Okay? For example, Christians, for that matter, oppose both liberalists and feminists' position on abortion. They argue that even the so-called human rights have limitations. Okay? Even human rights have limitations. Nobody has an absolute right over his or her body. Human bodies belong to God, the Creator, and as such, they cannot be used for immoral purposes. That means the question of abortion on demand, as expressed by feminists, is unacceptable by Christians, right? In any case, the baby in a woman is another human being. Yes, you may have your right, but you don't have, your rights should not override the rights of the baby in the woman. The woman's rights should not override the rights of another human being who is in her, and therefore the right to abort does not necessarily, does not allow. It's not a woman's right to abort. If, on the basis of ordinary moral reasoning, one cannot logically talk about his or her right to use his or her body the way he wishes if it conflicts with the rights of others. For example, does a man have the right to use his body to devour children? So, in other words, the child in a woman's body is not part of her body. It is distinct entity with human rights which must be respected. Thus, abortion is tantamount to killing this other innocent human being. 2, Christians also argue that human life is sacred. Only God is allowed to take away the life of a human being. The child in the womb is a creature of God, right? Only God can take away that life, not a human being. Okay? So this question, the question of sacredness of life, forbids abortion on demand, even for reasons such as preventing the birth of an unborn and unwanted child by parents, the possibility of deformities in the unborn child, and population control. Okay? So Christians cannot condone abortion for any reason, since life comes from God. Okay? In summary, we have discussed ethical and religious responses to the question of whether or not abortion should be allowed. While the conservatives outrightly reject or oppose abortion, moderate conservatives tolerate it conditionally, such as the health of the mother. Liberalists, on the other hand, embrace abortion at will, and even though moderate liberals consider factors such as the age of the baby. Feminists, on the other hand, campaign for abortion on demand as the right of women. Christians oppose abortion on the ground that human life is sacred, and indeed oppose abortion completely. This brings us to the end of this lecture, and I would like to give the following activity. Discuss the conservative, liberal, feminist, and the Christian positions relative to abortion. Discuss the conservative, liberal, feminist, and Christian positions relative to abortion. Thank you for listening to me.